How Russia has already lost the war. The war, according to most observers, is headed for a long drawn-out stalemate, but that doesn't mean Russia is winning, far from it. Putin wants total capitulation, but he clearly will never get it. That is the single one thing that cannot happen. Ukrainians will fight on, backed up by Western might, and that's it. Now consider for a moment the most favorable scenario for Russia. Imagine that somehow Russia manages to hold on to the territories it currently occupies. A big if. That will depend on how Ukraine's spring counteroffensive actually plays out. And further, imagine that Putin's demands for total capitulation are shelved so that some sort of an armistice is agreed, whereby Russia annesses Crimea and the Donbass. Even this partial victory, and one that no Ukrainian, for now, is willing to consider or accept, would still be a resounding defeat for Russia. Why? There are several reasons why there is no way Russia can win this war, either totally erasing Ukraine from the map, as Putin wants, or partially keeping the Donbass and Crimea. The first and most fundamental reason why is that any territory Russia acquires will have been thoroughly devastated by war and in need of total reconstruction, something Russia, an economic weakling, is in no position to do. Take the Donbass. This region used to be one of the main production areas for Ukraine's coal mining and manufacturing, and was, through the port city of Mariupol, a florid center of international trade. So, if and when peace should return, and supposing Russia has somehow kept control of the Donbass, it will be faced with a humongous task to build back up the whole area, what it has conquered at such a high price. In terms of both enormous human and physical resource losses, is a no-man's land, a smoking desert covered with debris and full of buried mines ready to explode. Russia has lost the economic war. It is slated to become a weak Cuba-like economy. Russia is a petro-state with practically no manufacturing capacity of its own, and it has already lost, because of the war, its most lucrative markets, those next door. Western Europe. No Westerner will invest again in Russia, not after this war is over, not ever. As to the gas and oil markets in Europe that used to be Russia's primary source of income, they will never again open up for Russia. Russia will necessarily have to look for the resources it needs to rebuild elsewhere. China? India? The BRICS, with Algeria set to join. Of course, something will likely trickle its way, but very little. None of the BRICS have the economic clout of the West, not even China, which, in addition, has no desire to jeopardize its lucrative markets in America and Europe. But how much concrete help can Russia expect from such countries when the time comes and it has to rebuild both the territories it might have conquered off Ukraine and its own economy? Also, let's not forget that Russia was never a large economic power to begin with, even before the war. More or less the size of Italy. This was the case already a decade ago. What was always big about Russia was its supposed military might, essentially built on two pillars. The large army it could potentially field, based on a population of 143 million, and its nuclear armament. The illegal Wagner mercenaries have shown, time and again, that the Russian forces are woefully mismanaged and inefficient. Don't believe such numbers, even if, inexplicably, UN organizations, the World Bank and the IMF, have accepted these figures without verification. And to be sure, such numbers are much less than the 29.1% of GDP loss reported for Ukraine. With its most lucrative markets shut down and no prospects of direct foreign investment large enough to jumpstart the rebuilding of its economy in the future. Once the war is over, Russia is headed in one direction only, down. Russia has lost the diplomatic war. Ukraine's candidacy to NATO is back on the table. NATO expansion was always seen by Putin as a threat and one of the alleged reasons for his decision to invade Ukraine. And this week, Ukraine's candidacy for NATO membership has come up again in the news. In Norway, Ukraine's application was once again considered as foreign affairs ministers of NATO member countries discussed whether some form of long-term guarantees, short of full membership, could be provided to Ukraine. Ukraine has been waiting to enter NATO since 2008 when it first placed its candidacy. Thanks to Putin's invasion, it now appears to be close to obtaining it at last. If it were not for Orban and Erdogan and their unhealthy courting of Putin, Ukraine would already be part of NATO. Looking at what Putin has obtained with his war, the losses he has caused with that special operation are simply staggering. Russia, A mighty country that once upon a time was looked at as one of the three major geopolitical forces in the world. The other two, being the USA and China, is now reduced to a second rank or even third rank, Cuba-like state.